A night shift on the haunted office. In the heart of the city stood a decrepit office building, its windows shattered and walls smeared with the stains of time. The once thriving hub of business had now become a place shrouded in darkness and mystery. No one dared to venture into its dilapidated corridors, except for those who had nowhere else to turn, the desperate souls seeking employment, who accepted the dreaded night shift. James, a young man struggling to make ends meet, found himself with no choice but to accept a job on the dreaded night shift at the haunted office. He had heard the stories, the whispers of unnatural sounds, flickering lights, and a cold presence that sent shivers down the spine. But he needed the money, and so, with trepidation, he entered the eerie building for his first night on the job. As the sun dipped below the horizon, James took his seat in a dimly lit corner. The office was silent, save for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak of the floorboards. With each passing hour, the silence seemed to grow heavier, pressing down on him like a suffocating weight. His fingers danced across the keyboard, trying to keep his mind occupied and the fear at bay. Suddenly, a whisper echoed through the office, barely audible, but enough to make James freeze in his seat. He strained his ears, trying to make sense of the faint words. "Leave before too late," the voice seemed to say, carried by an unnatural wind that seemed to sweep through the room. Goosebumps erupted on James' skin, and he glanced around, his heart racing. There was no one else in sight, yet he could feel the eyes of an unseen presence upon him. He forced himself to resume his work, dismissing the voice as a product of his imagination. But the shadows seemed to grow darker, and the air turned frigid, as if a malevolent force was gathering around him. Hours dragged on, and the whispers became more pronounced, forming chilling warnings and haunting questions in James' mind. Was he truly alone in the office? Why did the building seem to pulse with a life of its own? The dread intensified, and he began to see flickers of movement from the corner of his eye, shapes that vanished when he turned to face them. As the clock struck midnight, the office plunged into darkness. Panic clawed at James' chest as he fumbled for his phone, using its weak flashlight to illuminate the room. Shadows danced across the walls, contorting into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock his fear. And then, the lights flickered back to life, revealing a sight that made James' blood run cold. At the end of the hallway stood a figure, a woman in a tattered dress, her face hidden by long, unkempt hair. She swayed gently, her eyes fixed on James with a haunting emptiness. He stumbled back, his voice caught in his throat. Who are you?" he stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs. The woman's lips twitched into a macabre smile, and she whispered, "One who waits for release." Her voice was a mournful melody, a symphony of agony and longing, that seeped into James' very soul. Terrified, James turned and fled, his footsteps echoing through the corridor. But the building seemed to twist and stretch, the hallways elongating as if to ensnare him. Desperation drove him forward, and he burst through a door into a room that felt different from the rest, ancient and suffused with a malevolent aura. In the center of the room, he found an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. He skimmed through its entries, each one recounting the tragic tale of a woman who had once worked in the office, consumed by her ambition, and left to suffer alone. The journal spoke of a forbidden ritual she had attempted to perform to achieve success, but it had backfired, binding her soul to the office, trapping her in a cycle of despair. As James read, the room grew colder, and the shadows deepened. He realized that he was not alone. The woman was there, her ethereal form hovering behind him, her sorrowful gaze fixated on the journal. "Free me," she whispered, her voice laced with desperation. In a moment of daring, James took the journal and raced through the building, searching for a way to break the curse. He stumbled upon an old furnace in the basement, its flames long extinguished. With trembling hands, he tossed the journal into the furnace, and watched as it ignited with an eerie green flame. The ground shook, and the building seemed to wail as if in agony. The woman's anguished cries filled the air, reverberating through the walls. And then, silence. Exhausted and shaken, James emerged from the building, his heart heavy with the weight of what he had witnessed. As the first rays of dawn broke the horizon, the haunted office collapsed in on itself, consumed by the very darkness that had clung to its walls. But as the dust settled, a faint whisper brushed against James' ear, a soft, haunting thank you that carried with it a sense of finality. The woman's soul had found release, and with it, The horror that had gripped the office was no more. However, James knew that he would carry the memory of that night with him forever, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the mundane world. And as he looked back at the rubble that had once been the haunted office, he couldn't shake the feeling that something still watched from the shadows, waiting for another chance to ensnare an unsuspecting soul in its malevolent grip.